they will fall victim to the increasingly powerful tool, but then there are people who are going to use those tools to do things that are really incredible. They'll use them properly, and it could just be a lottery.
Right.
I often use the metaphor of, we're a bunch of or 100 million ants moving out in random directions into the jungle, and the vast majority of them are never going to find anything and die a sad death under a leaf somewhere. But there's one ant going to find a dead pig and tell all the other ants, "Here's the dead pig," and everybody comes running, and then you feed off that for a while, and that's the collective nature of it. But also, it I think the metaphor, is good in that it is a random poke into the darkness. Hopefully, it is an informed, like, well, I think northwest is probably the best way to go for a variety of reasons. It's downhill. The pig is probably closer to water. There might be more life down there, so things are going to die down there, as opposed to just going randomly off into nowhere. Um, so yeah, people are going to use these tools, and both you and I know, super talented, highly directed individuals that um the question of abuse of powerful tools is it's it's a stupid question even for them. Of course I'm not going to do that.
Studying your work was like having my own little corner of Polish, right after Iron Curtain, little corner of digital art education. Um,
Mm.
and so massive, massive, massive thank you for for being there and sharing your work, man. That's what basically got me started.
Well, that is cool. I would imagine you remember me posting a lot of the work I was doing at high
Mm-hmm.
resolution, like 1600 by 1200,
Yep.
where most people at the time were posting, 200 by 100, barely larger than thumbnails, because they were paranoid about getting ripped off or, something like that. And I was, and I still am, far more interested in, because I knew that I was doing something that, to my knowledge at that time, nobody else was doing, when that was
Mm-hmm.
trying to, paint with Photoshop. And I was really interested in what people were going to do with it. I wanted people to see it, and then, like, where is this going to go? This is at the very beginning of a fairly, rich, possibly branch of art, and I'm, it really, I that's paid off, I think, a lot, and that people saw what I was doing and then, like, went and did completely different things with it.
Yeah.
Which I'm really happy to see, and is a constant source of further entertainment for me to see just how things have evolved. Um, but personally, I'm starting to just kind of go backwards. I find that the tools that are available are much too powerful for my tastes, and a lot of the things that I experimented with a long time ago, I'm not using anymore out of design. I'm not saying, but it's important to know that, I don't think that those things are bad or wrong. They are very useful in a production environment, say for instance, like
Mm-hmm.
photo bashing or 3D, but it's just not right for me. Because I do think that it is, to use a tool to do work that you should probably be doing is damaging in the long run, even though it's immensely helpful in the short run.
Right. Yeah.
Um, and that of course applies to any tool from AI to Photoshop, because like the stuff. debates people are having with AI is the same thing that you hear with Photoshop, and still there are large areas of the art world that think anything like painted in Photoshop, it's all dreck and it's all ridiculous and it's all cheating. And and I thought those debates had been put to bed 30 years ago. But no, those attitudes are, I think, are the predominant in the wider public, not just in layman's, but also in the most art. The larger art world still looks at digital painting as not really painting at all. I
Hmm.
think that's one perception is they think that there are digital tricks that people are using to make it easier. And two, the general taste level of digital art is, let's be honest, not been the highest. And I kind of look at my own work as somewhat middle brow. I mean, it is not fine art. Um, but also it's not, you know, sexy orcs in thong bikinis with big shiny boobs. So that's why I call it middle brow. Um, yeah, there was a New York Times columnist, Farad Manjoo, I think, and he was teaching himself how to draw, and he was doing it on an iPad, and he was having some success with it because some of the perspective assistance was kind of opening his eyes to how it worked.
Hmm.
Um, so he posted it with great enthusiasm. And of course, all the art professors and drawing professors had to jump into the comments and say, this is nonsense. This is not drawing. Until you do it on pencil and paper, you're using a crutch, it's cheating, and it's horrible. And I don't know, I have complicated opinions as to that stance on it. In one sense, I can see, yeah, I guess that's somewhat true, but it's like, to me, it's like fire or any other tool. You can chop off a finger, but it can help you. But but it is something that an AI is so powerful that it's going to force the question: is how important is knowledge of structure and drawing and composition when you have that in your hand and can do it? How important is that? And a lot of very conservative people say you have to learn how to draw. That's still the basis. I don't take that as completely true because we all know people that they can't draw something, but you give them a lump of clay and they do beautiful things with it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there's something about the two-dimensional distortions of three-dimensional space that their brain can't handle, but they have wonderful judgment, they have wonderful taste, and create beautiful things. And if they didn't have these tools, nobody would ever know.
Yeah.
And that's really too bad. So, these 70-year-old people whose brains have shut down and have started to solidify what the world is and what an artist is, and saying, well, from the Renaissance, people have always learned how to draw, and that hasn't changed my. Well, that's really what I think is cool about these digital tools. But I understand their point, and I see it in myself, the human temptation to use that power to avoid doing work that I should be doing. So that's the other side of it. And that's super important. That's why I'm really not using 3D much or photo bashing, but no photo bashing at all now. I mean, I did 15 years ago, but now I draw and paint everything. My solutions are 2D solutions. I want to see the human hand. I want to see that. I don't, and I've used this example before, is if you take 100 people and have them sculpt something in ZBrush, the results are going to be somewhat homogeneous. Yet if you give those 100 people pencil and paper, the results are going to be very widely. And so it's that the narrowing effect of powerful tools needs to be very carefully monitored, both
Hmm.
collectively and individually, to see that it is not railroading over who you are as a person, even though it's how long do you really have to work at 3D before it can turn out something that's photorealistic? I mean, the upfront time cost is not high. I mean, is it any good? Well, no, that still probably takes a number of years to really make something special. In fact, it might even take longer because you are trying to fight your way from underneath this tool that puts its own imprint on things so harshly. So I'm anyway, that's those are just some thoughts I had.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, there's so much to unpack here, what you said. I've been making a couple of notes. Do you think I mean, let's linger on the tools for a second. Like, do you think, do you think the power they give and the limitations they give, like, how do you think that's going to translate to AI? Because I feel like AI is sort of like almost an exponent to what you said. It's like the immense amount of power it gives you for
Yes.
creation, right? But on the other hand, because the way, I mean, I think I had that conversation with Ash recently, and honestly, we shouldn't call it AI. We should just call it large language models, basically, because it's not sentient, right? It's not what futurists envisioned AI to be. It's more like a massive amount of data calculation with
Right.
objective to give you answers based on what's in the data sets, right? And so it's funny you mentioned with something like give 100 artists a ZBrush and the results will be somewhat homogeneous. I feel like AI is almost an exponent of that.
Yes,
Meaning,
absolutely.
yeah. Do you?
Yeah, and I've played around with all the image generators I can, trying to figure out how to use it properly and to not have it burn me, replace me, or and I to me Midjourney is pretty much useless because it just turns out the same stuff over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And and the look of the imagery is you can see it from 100 miles away. So it's almost like Midjourney is like a single artist who's very productive.
Yeah.
And I Stable Diffusion is a little bit more useful because it can work image to image, and you can set the blurring of the input. So I have had some interesting dialogues with it where I talk to it with imagery and it answers back and it goes back and forth like Pong. Like, people used to play
Mm-hmm.
Photoshop Pong. You can play Photoshop Pong with Stable Diffusion, and that's kind of interesting. But again, it's I don't know. It doesn't seem to, in its present state, it is extremely limited in its uses. I think it could probably be a wonderful texture painter for a 3D pipeline.
Yeah.
Um, but as far as actually being a concept artist, no, it's as you pointed out, at its current scale, it's almost like a really good indicator of, okay, what did Midjourney do? Okay, don't do that. It's a it's a negative prompt is what it is if you really want to be a concept artist,
Yeah.
because it is an average of what's out there. But on the other hand, when when the transformer architecture was made out like 2017, people were, okay, how promising is this? And I think everybody has been completely blown away by how effective it is, and really the reason why it became effective, and its effectiveness seems to be an exponential curve based on compute and size. And there essentially is like emergent behavior happening with scale,
Mm-hmm.
and that is only going to happen. Like, did they teach large language models how to do math? No, like they didn't teach it that. And like with Tesla's driving, it's learning about the world from working backwards in videos. I mean, it is learning things that it's putting out things that people didn't quite expect. And it is, what do they call it? oh, there's a special word for it, knowing what exactly is going on in this incredibly large matrix. Uh,
Like the latent space.
interpretability, I think, is
Hmm.
is the term. Um, but yeah, as things scale more, I mean, I kind of look at like, okay, yes, it is a prediction engine. Okay, so that is a deterministic reductionist way of describing what it is, but you can do the same thing with a human brain. It is a neuron firing or not firing, and then you scale it up and something different happens. Like a golf ball is a sphere, the earth is a sphere. What is the difference in complexity? Scale. And so there is qualitative differences in scale, which I think people are not, when they want to say, no, nothing weird is going to happen. There has to be completely different architecture. The scale isn't, no, I mean, it is, something is possibly going to happen, I think more in the near future, you know, um, I don't know. I'm not a big P doomer. I don't have a high P doom factor to me. Um, I don't know, but I have kind of thought about it. Like in the long run, of course, P doom, you're at one, right? So I don't know. It'll be. I feel it is such a fantastic time to be alive, to
Truly is,
see.
yeah.
And but it's like if we were trying to raise our kids in 1500, we would know what the world is, and 100 years from now, it's going to be pretty much the same. But now, what am I going to tell my late teen and early 20 kid? Uh, I don't know what the world's going to be in 2 to 5 years. And I guess probably the best thing to do is diversify as much as possible,
But don't
because
you?
you just
do
don't know what's going to work.
I had like an interesting kind of outlook on what it really is. Like to me, whether it's a stable diffusion or Midjourney or Chat GPT, which by the way, like I'm pretty sure you tried Chat GPT before. I had an experience with Chat GPT 4 when it came out and what it is now, and
Yeah.
it's vastly deteriorated. And I don't know if it's related to the fact that there's so many guardrails that has been put on it,
Yes. Yeah, it's
or
called the spicy mustard problem.
yeah. And I feel like the same is happening to Midjourney and all of those programs. I'm just curious if like I'm just not like to me all of it is sort of like fake jewelry, right?
Yes.
It's one of those things where to to someone who doesn't understand jewelry, it looks real, basically.
Hmm.
But once
Yes.
they learn it's not real, it's like, well, I mean, I'm duped, they lose complete sense of value of that thing, right? And to me,
Right.
it seems that AI is sort of on the edge of being that, meaning as soon as people realize that, oh, this was made with AI, then they lose respect to it because it's
Right.
vastly too easy to achieve the same level of complexity, right? And it's the
Yes.
same kind of it's something that actually Ash have said before, and it's stuck in my mind. And he said, like, if everything art, then nothing is, right? Because like if everyone is an artist, then no one is, because that becomes a commodity at this point.
Yes.
And so
Yeah. I mean,
I
that's an
wonder,
old Gilbert and Sullivan quote.
right? Yeah, and I wonder what is more likely is that it just becomes a commodity, or it becomes it's sort of like the like the tide raise all boats, meaning like the from zero to a certain level, that whole space becomes extremely compressed and easy to get to that point.
Well,
But
apply
then,
what you're saying to cameras.
right,
I think it's exactly the same dynamic.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I was to kind of like on the spot answer that, I would say technology has moved dramatically, right? It's
Yes.
quite impressive what you can get out of cameras, but honestly, filmmaking, it, it's you still have to have an eye and experience to make
Yes.
it work
Right.
proper. Um,
That is true. And so, I mean, to me, artists did not stop painting with the invention of cameras. And I'm sure this debate was had at that
mhm.
time. The same debate was had when Photoshop came along. And I think we're a long way off from being replaced, but I think the bottom tiers will be replaced. Just like cameras. I mean, it used to be if you were a, a, a middle class Victorian person, you would have paintings on the wall, and now a middle class person often has photographs on the wall.
Right.
If me as an artist, do I look at that? Do I go up to a person who has a photograph on the wall and tear it down and say, "You're putting me out of work"? No, it's pushed me to a different place, and in fact, I kind of look at it like AI was a kind of a wake up call and is a definition and a new data point for me to think of who I am as an artist and why that is special.
Mhm.
And so it has focused the mind a bit. And in a subtle way, I think it has improved my work because it's a different perspective to look at it. It's like it is kind of an intelligent, odd, alien perspective on what I do. Um, so yeah, I think that's been really nice.
What do you think
I
it's gonna do to young artists though? Like because like
I hope they yeah, well, yeah, go ahead.
I was fortunate enough to like as I've mentioned discover you, get inspired and have almost 2 decades to figure out who I am
Hmm.
in that process, right? Some artists do it quicker. Like there's so many amazing guys who came up in the mid 2010s and
Yeah.
they're, working for the biggest movies, creating amazing illustrations, like super talented, super creative, a lot of them very original. So that's even that's like a time frame of 10 years versus, well, why would I learn art if I can just prompt whatever I prompt is going to look better than anything I can learn in the next 10 years. I'm just like, I'm not saying that that's going to be the case because what I predict is there's the acceleration aspect of AI will likely produce over time tools or methods of learning art in vastly more efficient way, but it also just strips you away from failing and having experience to fail and kind of find yourself. I'm just curious, like, what's your take on that? Like, what do you think that's gonna do to new artists in the maybe short term and long term?
Well, I think the best guide we have is to go back to other revolutions in art, as you said, the photography and Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
And what has been the benefit? What's been the corrosive aspect of it? What has been the corrupting influence of it? And I think the best artists have an internal compulsion to create that transcends any tool. But
That's right. Yeah.
if you are a mid-level artist, and I see this all the time, in students, like the, the attitude is, okay, I paid you all this money, now tell me the secret. And I'm paying money for you to shorten the journey I have to become an artist. And yeah, I mean, you have to work smart and hard, and getting good instruction is a good idea. But sometimes really have to ask them, it's like, are you in this for the end goal? I mean, are you enjoying the process? Because you're up against a multi-decade climb here, even if you do get all the help and do everything right. And they're like, no, I just want to get to the top of the mountain as soon as possible. Saying, well, that person probably should be doing something else. And so I look at, again, there will be a hollowing out of people that probably shouldn't be doing this. They will fall victim to the increasingly powerful tool. But then there are people who are going to use those tools to do things that are really incredible. They'll use them properly. And it could just be a lottery.
Right.
I often use the metaphor of, we're a bunch of or 100 million ants moving out in random directions into the jungle, and the vast majority of them are never going to find anything and die a sad death under a leaf somewhere. But there's one ant going to find a dead pig and tell all the other ants, "Here's the dead pig," and everybody comes running. And then you feed off that for a while, and that's the collective nature of it. But also, it I think the metaphor, is good in that it is a random poke into the darkness. Hopefully, it is an informed, like, well, I think northwest is probably the best way to go for a variety of reasons. It's downhill. The pig is probably closer to water. There might be more life down there, so things are going to die down there, as opposed to just going randomly off into nowhere. Um, so yeah, people are going to use these tools, and both you and I know, super talented, highly directed individuals that um, the question of abuse of powerful tools is it's it's a stupid question even for them. Of course, I'm not going to do that. Midjourney's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I want to do my own artwork. But then there's going to be a mid-level person who probably shouldn't be doing what they're doing is going to say, "Oh gosh, I Midjourney has turned out some super slick thing, is super tight and clean, and I don't have to work all night to do that. That's awesome. So how can I touch this up so it doesn't look like it came out of Midjourney?" And that person is never going to turn out top level work anyway. So I,
Yeah.
I I just don't really see that it's going to be highly corrupting people who would not be corrupted anyway.
I agree on that. Like there's a certain cut of people that no matter what, like they don't need to be told how
No,
to get somewhere. They
they
ask
love
those
to draw and paint.
questions.
They love to
Right.
work. They love to think. They love to solve problems. They're not going to give up that pleasure to an automated thing.
Yeah. I'm looking at it because like obviously I've been in the industry for like much shorter time than yourself. You've been,
Really? Well, I mean, but you're a Siege, and you've probably been working as long as I have.
I mean, I've discovered the craft and your work and digital art on Siege, and I joined like digital art in 2004, like actually working for a client for the first time. So I mean, in in eyes of a lot of artists, current artists, yeah, I would say I am a veteran too, but nowhere near as as yourself. I would like never dare to compare. Um, my but I'm curious. I'm curious. What do you think about? Because I agree on the aspect of artists who are like very well like, and that's just not artists. That's just creative people in general. Or people who know what they want from life. They usually just seek answers, and they'll just dig and fail until they find those answers, right?
Right.
But not everyone is like that. And I wonder if because here's my thinking process. Like if what we have now and the amount of creativity that comes out, because I would say like last 20 years is almost like a renaissance of how creative things became, right? There's just so much going on. There's so many amazing people. And I think like obviously social media and the internet helps to spread the word and discover. So maybe that's like a bigger aspect of how much we actually see is based on the fact that we get to see everything now. Um,
Yes.
but also I'm just curious if the volume and saturation matters in terms of how many outlier outcomes we're gonna get in terms of artistic people and people who are like really well driven and are spearheading the movement and creating new ideas and whatnot. And the reason I'm asking this is because based on what I understand, and I've played with all of the Midjourney and Stable Diffusion extensively. I've tried Runaway and the video editors. I have my own opinions about what they are. They are very much overlapping with what you've been saying so far. But honestly, a lot of what's there, it's basically based on the training material that already existed. And so
Yes.
if there's a vastly less volume of art that's being created or new things that are being discovered in terms of art and techniques and new styles and whatever you call it, right? Then there is a vastly less volume of how much of that would be fed into something like Stable Diffusion or Midjourney, and therefore you would expect that those tools will have a higher degree of entropy over time.
Yes. Yeah, that's been an off-sided problem of it training on its own output.
Yeah, because yeah, like for example, if you ask Midjourney, and you know this obviously, but if you ask Midjourney for like a very specific things, like create me a Marvel character, it's gonna make you like every imaginable Marvel character, right?
Right?
But then when you ask it, like, I want this Marvel character to be an anime character with cell shaded materials, let's say, and it needs to be made out of wood, it will give you a Pinocchio, like
Yeah.
realistic Pinocchio, no matter how you prompt it, right?
Yeah.
So it should tell people who are just like trying to objectively say that artist materials have nothing to do with those. It's like, no, they actually do. It's all trained on the existing data. But yeah, but I'm curious, like, I'm very curious where it's all going to go. Very worried that it might affect some artists who maybe just needed a little nudge to understand which direction to go to become more curious. It's like this old saying of when you go to school, it kills your creativity because you're kind of forced to read books and sit like almost like a military fashion and
Right?
read shit you don't want to learn about, and your teacher is an idiot.
Yes.
So I wonder if that's gonna have the same diminishing effect, on creativity, and we might lose a good swap of amazing outcome that otherwise we
Hmm.
would have. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Uh, I don't know. I kind of go back to what I was saying earlier, and that the people that really drive things forward are forces of nature.
Yeah,
And,
I cannot dispute that for sure.
so if we're talking about, people who are on the edge and them being corrupted, uh, I don't know.
It's almost like a game of statistics.
It is. And then, now that I am, 60, I I don't trust my own opinions. I have to assume that I have fallen victim to the cranky old man syndrome,
That's
even
funny.
though I feel that I don't, that I have not, and I have taken steps and am self-aware enough to see it in other people and to make sure that I try to keep my mind open. But still, there is, because usually by the time people get to my age, they're wanting a simplification of the world. I've been alive for a long time. I have distilled my experience down into a few simple rules that I think transcend all time and all universes. And I think that's total bullshit and very destructive, which is why you get pedantic teachers that, as you mentioned, people hate, because they're like, well, you have to do it this way. This is wrong. And there's always a paradigm outside the one that in which that absolute is true. And always, like if you were to play hip hop for Beethoven, what would Beethoven say? We would have no even frame of reference to judge it. We
Yeah.
wouldn't think it's music, but clearly it is. And so, yeah, that's what happens. You get to be 60 and your brain turns to concrete, and you have these few rules that you fall back on because it's comfortable. And I don't have to think anymore. I have these rules to judge all experience by. So then when I have some 20-year-old kid come by and saying, well, you have to learn how to draw, and this is the right way to draw a hand. And that is incredibly damaging. I refuse to do that. So my test is now, if I get a student and I don't understand what they're doing, that's the best possible outcome.
Mm,
If you've confused Craig, you're doing well. Uh, because I have to assume that I don't know what's going on. But
right.
then, I see someone like, Kanye West or Ye or whatever. You know, I listened to a Lex Fridman podcast of him talking for like 3 hours and, comparing himself to Shakespeare. And, the man didn't say a single interesting thing in 3 hours, yet he says he's the greatest creative person that ever lived. Well, I didn't see any evidence of it. But on the other hand, obviously there's something there because he has a lot more success, followers, money, reputation, fame than I do. So I could either look at that as the corruption of today's world, or I could look at it as an operational definition and just say, look, by definition, this man is more successful than me. He's closer to the truth than me. So maybe what it is, you just you have to sit there and say over and over to the world that, I shit gold and I piss excellence and I am nature's greatest miracle. You say it enough and people believe it and you bootstrap your way and that is your expression. Maybe that is a way of doing things. I mean, that's certainly, it's been tried for people wanting to vault themselves into positions of power everywhere. Sometimes it works. It's a different way, but yeah, I think it is destructive when elder statesmen's brains, because at some point you get to a point of authority, and then you have the possibility of argument from authority, right at the same time that your brain is turning to concrete, and that's destructive. So now I have influence and power, uh, on the way that younger people look, and that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of reluctant to teach. And everybody that I do teach, I have to say to them, look, this is. Do not listen to what I'm saying. Listen with one ear open. And the people that are really, really creative, well, they're probably not taking a class from me anyway. But the ones that do, and I think they do listen with one ear open. And like I've learned huge amounts from when I was younger from older artists. And did I take what they said as verbatim? No, and I think that's kind of a more Western way of looking at things. Maybe in the East with the master's student, I mean, you're supposed to duplicate your master's art and move the needle forward a very small amount, whereas here you're supposed to, stand on the head of your master's and get as far up as you can. The rate of change and innovation is more valued, which is an interesting fact to me because um, you know, innovation it is more powerful in the marketplace because people want something that's new, which is very capitalistic value. But then most artists are very left-leaning, yet they buy into the whole innovation at all costs idea, which is
Yeah.
that of a market,
A
which
paradox.
is it is. Um, So anyway, I do hope that my brain has not turned to concrete. I am keeping it stirred so that it doesn't congeal, but I have to accept the fact that it might have already happened. Um, and I'm just imitating somebody with a more flexible outlook. That could be a possibility too, because it's a physiological thing. But how much can by certain ways of thinking, can you actually change the structure of your brain? And I do try to expose myself to things that I don't actually like, and that's very good. And I think people need to do more of that. Like, okay, if there's a bunch of people out there that like something but you don't, try to figure out why and what is their standpoint that makes them like it. Like, okay, I don't like velvet paintings of Elvis. Or, like I say, I don't like orcs and thong bikinis, but a lot of people do. Okay, I think I understand why. But can I find some beauty in it? Because you never know what you're really going to like and find as beautiful in 5 years. I hope that it's not going to be but I mean, again, there are people with totally different models. Some extremely conservative people go into the Italian system and they spend their whole life, rendering knees, spending 3 weeks rendering knees, and they find beauty in that, and they have an audience for that, and
Hmm.
that's awesome. But the whole thing has become so balkanized. I mean, there used to be a central authority of the French Academy, and they defined for the whole world what art was. And I think it's great that it has atomized. It's almost like no, and there's walls between them. I'm not sure if they're firewalls or just lack of interest. I don't think they're firewalls, but I think it's lack of interest. But it's great that so many people have gone off in so many different areas, and there isn't a central authority. And then you have, people like the art renewal people that say, no, Bouguereau is the greatest artist in history, hands down. It's not even open to discussion. It's like, well, okay, that's fine. I'll take my own medicine and say you're entitled to that opinion. I think you're wrong, but I'm open to be uh, uh, open to a debate on that. But
It Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've been giggling half of the time you were talking because of what you said about like the concrete brain and getting older, because I see it in myself too, by the way. Like
yeah,
I'm 40, right? But I see how
you're
different I
40
think.
now, really?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
The way I think now versus the way I was thinking 10 years ago is just vastly different, right? And then everyone is like, I'm young. Those old farts, they are like so conservative and think that like they don't understand me. It's like, you just wait and see. Everyone goes through this, right? Like I used to be
Yes.
the same. It's like I'm never gonna think like my mom used to think, and I'm like getting older. It's like I totally understand why my mom would think this way.
Yeah,
um,
yeah. I tell my kids, well, you're gonna be probably moved to the right as you get older too. But no,
or
I'm
maybe it's more. I think it's more that we kind of are the same as we used to be, but the world is progressively moving and changing, and we are sort of a mirror images of our upbringing, And
yeah.
I think I've recently have had this epiphany that we aren't really adults. We're still children with just a lot of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I used to play video games when I was growing up, and I still think like a video game nerd, to this day. And I would torture my daughter with the music I liked. And that didn't change. Like I mean, it changes over time, right? But I still like have my taste that is sort of like very rooted in my upbringing. And it's like if I would play it to my mom, she would be like, "What's wrong with you?" Right? Because she has a completely different taste from the era
Right.
that she was up, growing up. So I think there's an element of that. And to your point of sort of like the academics, and I feel like I think it's just this kind of very reductionist kind of viewpoint, um, sort of kind of dig in your heels and
Yeah.
not really accept anything beyond your authority. I think it's like it's reductionist, but don't you think it's more related to just to the idea of just having like your ego not in check and not allowing yourself, because a lot of people do that. They just don't allow themselves to portray themselves as failure, or I mean, most people don't like to portray themselves as having any failure in life, right? Like we like to, especially now with social media, just to promote how everything is just awesome, like in that Lego movie, right? um, but in reality, it's like, well, I mean, to get to that point, you have to fail so many times, you know? And
Yes.
but I think people get hung up on the idea that everyone else cares, but when they really don't, you know, it's just sort of like
No.
it's all in your head.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an old saying in golf was that nobody cares how you played, and the ones that do care wish you'd played worse.
That's true.
People have hard getting their head around that. But yeah, it is. Mm, I think there is an element of when you get older, you just don't have as much energy and
Oh, for sure.
mentally. So the thing is that if you can reduce the world to a few axioms, it's simply easier. You
Yeah.
don't have to worry about being wrong as much, and if these things work and if these rules work in your environment, then yeah, you set it up, and it's like an intellectual gun turret. You look down this hallway and blast anything that comes, and never thought of it that way, but that's really what it is. Yeah, you can defend your space just by saying these are truths throughout time. Like Bouguereau is the greatest artist of all time. Nothing that comes afterward, is even close to his mastery. He is the pinnacle of what started in 1500, and it's like. But actually, like the art renewal people, I think they have a giant collection of his paintings, and that's why they're trying to pimp them so hard. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
surprised. I think I heard that from somebody. But yeah, those guys, I mean, I try to be open-minded, but those guys at Art Renewal, they really bug me a lot.
I can tell. uh,
Yeah,
you know, it's
they're not exactly radical. So I guess I'm
right.
being irritated by the super reactionary, which I don't know, is my brain turning to concrete if I'm irritated by super reactionary people? Maybe not.
Or just you're
But
calling out the bullshit. That could be the explanation too. It's funny.
yeah,
It's funny though what you've been saying about like sort of the tools and limitations. Like the most powerful tools limit you the most in a way.
yes,
It's sort of the same with the idea of connectivity and social media and internet and everything. It's like the whole fact that we are like at one end we can see the whole world as it is, right, and get all the
mm,
information you could ever imagine. Like you can have more information in your pocket on your phone than most high-ranked politician, king, emperor, or whatever
right.
would have 50 years ago, right?
That's
Like
true.
you're so much more powerful and so much more connected, and you can meet everyone in the world and get inspired and all that. But on the same vein, it's like I don't think humans are meant to be exposed to so much influx of data that comes our way every day, especially if you
Oh,
remain connected, right? So when you say like reducing your environment to things that work, then I completely can understand how everything else becomes sort of like an intrusion to that simplified complexity in your life.
right.
And now it just becomes irritating
Well,
because it's
I
like, you know,
think about like the people that you've been saying about the explosion of creativity from some people since the 2005, 2010. I think there are some people that can handle the world in your pocket and are using it
yeah,
well.
yeah, for sure.
But most people, it's probably overwhelming. And yeah, I mean, so social media was, and the internet was supposed to turn us into a bunch of highly informed philosopher kings participating in a utopian democracy. And it was going to work better because everybody's more informed. But no, it's actually turned so much of tribal monkeys who want to kill each other.
Yeah.
So, but no, that you're right. But yeah, these tools are being used by some people very effectively as
Mm.
they were intended. And it's like any other tool. Some people use them better than others, and some people have an insight into how to use them, how to integrate them, and even taking things that have been previously isolated that nobody sees a connection between, they see the connection. It's like how long did kite foils exist? How long did surfboards exist? 50, 100 years until somebody figured out, oh, we use them together. Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
And with digital art, it's the same way. And the insight that some people have, where it comes from, I don't know. And to touch briefly back on AI, it's the way that it is now, and the spicy mustard problem, I think, is influencing the image generators negatively. Um, and the creativity seems to be somewhat of a lower order in that it is taking two things that don't fit and crashing them together, which is a form of creativity, but I don't think it's the highest form. You look at super master paintings, and there's some life there that goes beyond, well, I'm going to combine science fiction and 1940s detective movies and call it Blade Runner. That's taking two things and crashing them together,
Mm.
and something new emerges from it. Um, but is that Citizen Kane? Or is it 2001? Probably not. I don't think it's quite as, Kubrick would spend a decade working on a film, and there has to be some output there. And I'm not sure that an AI can do that, but I think it can. I mean, if compute is infinite, even simple models can become indescribably powerful. Simple paradigms can, if the compute is infinite, which it might become, in which case all bets are off.
Yeah, I'm very curious if that's gonna be. Oh, I'm sure it is possible over time. The question is what that timeline is, right? Because right now, just delving into what people who are developing AI tools and talking about computing, and even just NVIDIA itself, there is a realistic concern about how much of a compute we can create in near future, right? Because all of those things are compute heavy, but they become more
Oh
optimized and
yeah.
they become less compute heavy. But
Oh yeah,
then
absolutely.
on that vein, then the model becomes more sophisticated and becomes computer heavy again, like compute heavy again. So there's like a cat and mouse game in a way, and it all produces
Yeah.
sort of the outcome that is very, very incredibly hard to predict in terms of where it's all gonna go for everybody, basically, right?
Hmm.
Which is fascinating, but it's also just like head scratching um, and I don't think I would ever use a word concerning. I'm if I was in the position of being like an illustrator that does commission work, for example, right? That to me that's basically a death sentence, and that's definitely the word I would use. It's like definitely concerning or depressing, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I always looked at it from like a point of curiosity, because curiosity is basically what brought me to where I am, and
Right.
and to a degree, I mean, you without your curiosity, I don't think digital art would have been what it is, and by proxy, then all of those AI image generators would not be what they are. Like that's at least my personal opinion about it, right?
Well, I'm still waiting on a check.
That's right. Yeah.
But
Touche.
there's a lot of people that said, "Well, that's nice. You have an attitude of curiosity about it." But I'm the one who's out of work, baby.
That's right.
And
That's right. I mean, it's definitely affecting the industry very profoundly. I hear it left and right, from a lot
yes,
of people that you would not expect like they would be concerned, and they are. So
yeah,
I'm not trying to diminish that at all. I think what I'm
yeah,
trying to do here is look at it from a because like it's what you've mentioned about sort of like the, I mean, I'm still giggling inside when you said the brick brain and sort of like the concrete brain and getting
hmm
older and all that stuff. It's like, because I know from at least from what I expected to be true, and the more of the latest research when it comes to like neuroplasticity of brain, and the I can't remember what I read this, but it was like a one of those scientific sort of study that was like peer reviewed, that yes, like our brains are actually neuroplastic until we die, and they're not reductive over time. You can still mold and create new synapse connections and learn new things, and maybe the rate of that is diminished by the fact that we're aging and all that kind of stuff, but you can still learn skills, and change the way you think and you operate as a human, even when you're like much older than
yeah.
what was expected like in the
I'm
past.
sure there's a high level of individual variability in that plasticity.
Right. So what it leads, at least in my kind of monkey brain, to like the conclusion I'm getting to here is that if that's true, then I think looking at things from like, okay, well, the reality is what it is. So how do I, like, what's the best sort of like a mental approach to find where it's all gonna lead? Because I feel like having this kind of thinking allows me to be a little more open-minded and less judgmental to what's happening in the world. It's like the same kind of the comment you've mentioned about like Kanye, for example, right? Like he's a very divisive figure. Some people love him, some people hate him. Put that aside, whatever he's doing makes him being loved by a lot of people and hated by a lot of people, right? To that degree, Rick Rubin would say if your audience is not divided between love and hate and everyone loves you, then you're not doing enough, you know?
All right. Yeah.
So I'm just sort of like, yeah, I'm very curious, like genuinely curious where it's all leading. It's definitely going to create new industry. I can totally see that. Or perhaps it's just going to be, by the time it becomes such a massive issue for everybody, then maybe it changes the world completely because now it's affecting pretty much everyone. It's like the whole aspect of AI and art is huge for us as artists because we are artists and it's like the closest thing to us, right? But
Yeah.
it's affecting all the other industries, and by the time where it's very significant, it's significant enough everywhere that there are, because of the infinite boost of productivity that is spread across different industries, now it forces the markets or the governments to make the life easier for everybody. And therefore, now maybe the sort of like day-to-day worries about electricity cost or whatever become less significant, but the more significant question becomes the question of like meaning of life and whatnot, so like it kind of it those thoughts bombard my brain every day.
Right.
And I don't know any answers to any of it. But I would
Yeah. I
like to,
heard a
but I would like
good
to think that,
definition.
I would like to think that at least thinking about it in more sort of like less destructive way gives an
Yeah.
opportunity to be like more open have eyes more open to opportunities and spotting where things are going to go a little sooner, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I mean, you really have to stay aware of what is coming. Um, I heard, I can't remember where, it was a good definition of decadence. It was wealth without purpose or meaning.
Right.
And that resonated with me. And yeah, in a post-scarcity world, if that is indeed where we're headed, even the most positive utopian predictions come true, um, we will become quite decadent, won't we?
Hmm.
Unless we can figure out, so why are you here if it's not to break rocks? Uh,
Yeah.
because we have backhoes to do that now. I'll find something else to do. I don't know. I kind of
We all
my
moved to
cat.
Mars to start over.
Yeah, let's try to do it differently. But I don't find that my cat has any problems feeling decadent.
I think cats specifically are just, they are decadent.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They
They
have
have
no
no meaning
problems
or
with that at all.
purpose. Like, what the heck are you talking about? Get out of
Give
my
me food.
face. Yeah.
Give me food.
So I don't know. Could we be that? If you're,
We all become cats.
yeah. Sometimes you could look at it like human beings are like a bow, and if you try to shoot a bow without an arrow in it, it explodes.
Hmm.
And there has to be some type of or boiling a pot without any water in it, it melts.
Right. Yeah.
There has to be a load there. Um, hmm. But I am sure that every time there has been an innovation, it's the same patterns being played over and over. As something is innovated, it's used poorly in the beginning. Naysayers and doomsayers say this is terrible, it should be banned. It's going to destroy us all. And then people figure out how to use the tool better. And anybody who you've seen use a tool in an expert way, it's almost magic. And so our ability to adapt and use a tool in a better, more sophisticated, safer, more effective and efficient way is stunning.
Yep.
And so I really think that the same thing is going to happen with our new digital overlords. Um, that hopefully they will allow us to maintain the illusion of control. Uh, uh, was that quote from The Simpsons? I for one welcome. Yeah, of course that is certainly possible. Um, I just didn't know, but not knowing is the coolest thing. Because every morning you wake up and there's some new thing. Like, who would have thought like the cat and mouse game with Nightshade? Yes, we can poison the models. I
Yeah.
mean, this stuff is happening like weekly. The new salvos in this war of how innovation is being played out. But I just think you really have to go back to previous upsetting revolutionary innovations and see that this is probably not qualitatively different. I think the only thing about it is just I have made the argument that quantity makes qualitative differences, like in the scale of compute with AI, and people are like, okay, well, you just said it. Quantity makes it different qualitatively, so is this the same as the revolution of cameras or Photoshop or computers? And I'd say maybe, maybe not. But I also I go back to say 2005, and I put, as I said earlier, put all my work out there in high resolution, and people started reverse engineering it uh, in mass. A lot of people, and turning out pretty good imitations of what I was doing. And so a lot of clients that I had at that time, that was a huge, steep growth in games and films.
Mm-hmm.
Fix work for games, and so they had the interest in hiring employees. So they hired all these people to reverse engineer my work, and so I go back to the client and say, "Hey, how you doing? Got any work?" No, we've hired three people whose work look exactly like
Right,
yours,
right.
and so my income fell by two-thirds at that time. And I had mixed feelings about it, but only mixed feelings for about 10 seconds when I realized that, this is the way the world works. Nothing is out of whack here. It may be bad for me in the short term and financially, but this is how influence works. And I learned a huge amount from people that I was influenced by. This is the way of things. Um, okay, so now we come forward to now, and what is different? The difference is scale again. That in 2005, there were a handful of people, but they could turn out, images that look like mine at a walking pace, and now that is totally different. So does scale once again affect the whole thing? In this case, yeah, I think it does. But if you extrapolate out different shocks to the system, say 500 years from now, the rate of change is going to be so high that I don't think our reptilian brains can really deal with it. And I do
Yeah.
think that the vast majority of people, um, if things change too quickly, their minds shut down and they actually regress to the lower parts of their brainstem, and you get reactionary behavior, as opposed to, hang on, brave new world. It's, no, I'm going to smash all the sewing machines. Yeah, and I do think, like, in this country, um, the left has had the judiciary on its side for 50 years, and everybody thought once Archie Bunker died, that was it. There was going to be no more reactionary sexist pigs because, well, they're all dead, and then the Soviet Union fell. It's the end of history. So liberal social democracies forever. It's a golden age. Well, things haven't quite worked out that way, have they? And
History repeats.
it's
Pendulum
a
swings.
spiral at the very least,
Yep.
yeah. But it is, but it's also, just the rate of change. I think, people tried to make uh, people change too quickly, and it's like bending a rod. You can bend it further if you bend it slowly. And
Yeah, I wonder if that's just going to basically like exactly what you're saying about sort of the reactionary aspect of it. I feel like if the rate of change becomes too quick, people will react and react violently to slow it
yes,
down, and it will slow
yes,
down. It's what's interesting what you said about 2005, because that's exactly where I start. Like 2004, 2005 is the time I started, and that's when games industry were going through a massive revolution. It was sort of the old school and the new, like the old gen and new next gen. Everyone
yeah. They
was
started
calling
hiring
everything
a bunch
next
of
gen.
film artists. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. And the next gen, there was a reason, because of the next gen was like it meant for like gaming specifically the change of how textures were made and lighting was made, instead of baking everything into a texture, and therefore having like much more efficient smaller teams that could do the whole work. You would now have to have much bigger teams to build everything in real time, and have the lighting systems that are real time, and then normal maps and all this kind of crap, right? Like very technical.
oh yeah, very
And it
technical.
and it meant that the industry started to grow rapidly. And it's interesting what you said about, sort of reverse engineering of your work and all that. It, like, putting aside the how it affected you, because you already expressed it, and I totally agree. And it's like, I think everyone can relate to that. It's like, whoa, like, I've put a lot of effort into this, and now I'm kind of feeling like on the other I'm on the other end of the stick for whatever reason, right?
Uh-huh.
But like in the global term, I mean, would you ever imagine back in 2003 or 4 that the video games industry is going to be what it is today? Like, I don't think anyone was imagining that, right? It's kind of crazy
Uh,
how much it grew.
yeah, I kind of see it because I knew how addictive they were.
Right.
And that was going to be more. I mean, I was a competitive Left 4 Dead player, and then I said no, I'm never after that ended, I said I'm not touching another one of these things. It's like, why would you pick up a syringe and put heroin into your arm voluntarily? So,
Yeah.
it's just, and they're designed that way. So many
For
products are
sure, for
designed to
sure.
be addictive. So seeing where it has come, I guess that, yeah, I wouldn't have supposed that, the levels of realism, but also the level of addictive quality. I wonder if game companies, hire psychologists to say, can you get this to be more addictive for us?
I mean, I don't know how it is now. At least when I worked at Naughty Dog, we've never thought about games in that way. You know, we're just like, what would be fun for players to do? That's sort of like was
Right.
always the approach. But I'm pretty sure there are some scummy games that are, you know,
There are Skinner
approaching.
boxes,
Yeah, like the loot
like
box
like
systems
freemium
were.
stuff.
Yeah, exactly. I'm yeah.
But I mean, Naughty Dogs, I mean, they're a premium high-end thing. They're making art. They're not making a
Right.
Skinner
Yeah. Yeah.
box.
That's true. Just again going back to my original point, like I was thinking more about from the fact of like how much the industry expanded and created new opportunities, right? And
Yeah,
new positions and everything compared to where it was just merely like 10 years ago, let's say. Well, I
yeah,
mean, like back, let's say 2004 and 2014, it's like almost like 100x of what the industry has become. and
yeah.
and then the concept art thing became an actual job because it didn't used to be a job before. Like before you,
No,
it was like film illustrators maybe, or people in craft or something. I remember talking to my one of my friends from the film industry, Paul Osimo. When he was starting, he was like, "Yeah, dude, like I mean, I was a model maker. I was trying to be a model maker, and I just like started looking around, and there it was, James Cameron movie, and I was hired from the street." I was like, "What the fuck, dude?" But it was because just there was no one else to hire in LA, right?
right. Yeah, that's right.
Um, and now
And
it's like
and
it's so
games always
vastly
took their
different,
cues from movies anyway. I mean, they
right?
wanted to make interactive movies. That was kind of the goal from the start,
Mm-hmm.
which I
Exactly.
think
So
they've kind of done.
I guess the only kind of big question mark is okay if we now map it back to something like the AI revolution, is that going to create a market that we just don't know what the market is just yet, or is the rate of change too rapid for people to adapt? You know?
Well, yeah, I I think using LLMs for NPCs is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
And I could see that, okay, this world that you're walking around, like you're walking around in model New York City in 1890, and you can talk to all these people, and
Yeah.
they sound reasonable. But could they really affect how the game goes? And could the AI keep track of what was said to you and make a coherent and flexible story that is affected by the choices that you make? Because I mean, they are good at remixing and coming up with novel storylines that are coherent. And that's another interesting thing, about emergent behaviors. They shouldn't be able to do that, yet they do. I mean, yes, obviously they hallucinate, but they can tell. You can ask it for a story of a gay red pony in ancient China comes across a bunch of brigands that want to break it in and ride it, and it'll do that, and it'll be a coherent story, and that's really incredible.
There was a
that.
podcast that Lex Friedman did with, I think it was like the Facebook chief AI engineer,
Uh-huh.
Jan LeCun.
Yeah.
That was an amazing, eye-opening, kind of very informative podcast. Like I've sent it to a
Yes.
bunch of my friends. It's like I cannot listen to this. It's just too technical. And I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? It's so. It was very technical, by the way. um,
Yes. Yeah, I listened to that one.
yeah. So yeah, it was very interesting to kind of like how he was describing the limitations and possibilities and the emergent behaviors and as you mentioned, um, it's like once you listen to the podcast, or at least if you take it by the on the face value, you're like, oh yeah, like all of those things start to make sense, you know.
Hmm.
And it's almost like the way those LLMs work is it's not really like this magical kind of, oh, I was not expecting it to do it this way. It's like more related to the fact that they were designed to give you an answer no matter what, you know, whether this answer is
Hmm.
true or not. And
Yes.
therefore, and that becomes this kind of magical effect. So, well, it gives me answer. That's what it's designed to do. But the
Hmm.
how it came with the answer is sort of like this. It feels very magical in a way. Um,
Yes.
but I wonder if the novelty of that just gonna wear off as the more we interact with it, the more we understand, the less of this. Like it's like seeing a magic trick and then knowing how the magic trick was done. You know?
Yes. I can either be more entertaining or less entertaining.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it's very fascinating. Man, it's almost like it's crazy. It's crazy how AI became like sort of like the forefront of all of discussions everywhere, whether we like
Yes.
it or not. I want to step away from that for just a second because I am like very curious about this. When you decided to, or like, how did the whole Photoshop thing came to you? Because you have very extensive, you know, experience with traditional art. Like you're absolutely fucking amazing painter, right? Um, and I think if I recall it correctly, and this is my old brain reacting right now, you've done quite a lot of work, the digital work, where you would mix your paintings too into it. I'm just very
Yes.
curious, like where did the whole Photoshop thing, like how did it appear on your map, like on your peripheral? What was your like initial thinking? Um, and like how did digital art, like what, because we kind of started from the end where you went through this whole journey and you now feel the need is like, yes, the tools are amazing, but they're actually limiting me more than I would like, and I like to not be limited creatively, right?
Yes.
I wonder how, like how your brain was operating back then when all of those things were emerging for you.
Well, I was considerably younger, so my appetite for novelty maybe was higher.
Mm-hmm.
It could be an aspect I haven't thought of, until our discussion today. Um, I don't know. I mean, it's like it was just so dropped at my feet. So many things were just like sitting there. Obviously, it's like there's a rocket here, and there's some fuel over there, and there's a pad here that somebody like conveniently left for me. And if I oh, even somebody put an arrow on the ground saying put fuel in rocket. Um, yeah, it was really quite a bit of just fortunate luck that things came together. Um, so one was, I was trained as an industrial designer, not necessarily as an illustrator,
Mm-hmm.
and I had experience in using something called a Dubner paint box in like 1986, and so this is before Macs had 24-bit color. This is still like in Fat Mac eras,
I was still
but I,
shitting my
I,
diapers back then. Yes.
yeah, and the earliest digital paintings I have are from like 1982 on a Macintosh using McPaint. It just, and I'm okay to answer your question. I'm trying to put like what was I thinking, when I was how old was I in 1982? I was 18 and using McPaint. Okay, I'm thinking back to Ohio, sitting in my bedroom. I can see the Fat Mac sitting there, and I can hear the disk drive on the floppy disk going zzz, zzz,
That's right.
just shedding itself. Usually, um, but at the time, I was interested in art, and I was into Sargent's paintings at that time. I remember doing copies of them when I was 18.
Hmm.
So trying to paint in McPaint, I just think, I mean, just the way they named it. Okay, here I am painting. I'm, copying Lady Agnew by Sargent, and there's this computer, and it has a program called Paint. Well, that's the same word that's on this tube of color.
Yeah.
To say these things are just kind of laid at my feet. Obviously, you're going to try to do them, but again, it's like one of those things, like the example of a surfboard and a kite, and putting the two things together. They sat side by side for a long time before somebody went to put the two together. And think how many times somebody tried to kite foil on a surfboard and got their ass handed to them. That somebody persevered. That's kind of interesting. And I could see maybe a lot of people um, who were trained artists. They had a Macintosh. They had McPaint because it came with every Macintosh. It was Bill Atkinson's, I think, was the programmer. Um, but why did I either stick with it, or why was I able to do images right away that were somewhat sophisticated? That I don't know. Because if you look at those Mac Paint images, they were actually pretty similar to what I'm doing now.
Hmm.
I mean, they were atmospheric, they were suggestive, they were everything that I was looking at in Sargent's work at the time. Whereas other people using McPaint, they weren't using it um, in the way that I was. And why did that happen? I have no idea. So when, like in '86, the reason I was using a Dubner paint box, which was essentially Photoshop before Photoshop, uh, they built, when I was at Ford as a car designer, they made full-size clay models, and then they would die knock that, and that is when you put reflective foil over the full-size clay model, and then you have this, 100, like 10,000 pound clay thing, and it's all shiny. And they asked me to take photographs of the model and then render transparent glass into to figure out what it would actually look like as a car. So it was
Hmm.
photo retouching at the time. And then I was at ILM, and John Knoll was there, and they just got a few Mac FXs, and we were working on a show called Young Indie. And actually, it was, I think, as a commercial for British Petroleum, and me and Yusei Wesky were still doing traditional mats. I think we both did the last traditional mats at ILM, because when I left there, when that commercial wrapped, uh, they liquidated everything in the matte painting department and replaced them all with Macs.
Hmm.
But the
Interesting.
point is uh, we were taking our paintings, putting them in the matte stand, and then playing with it in Photoshop, because we were curious, well, what would it look like a little more exposed or a little bit greener, etc. And since they were probably going to be digitized anyway, And even before that, I would do a traditional painting and it would come back in pieces if it was gouache because they ripped it off the back of the illustration board and put it on a drum scanner to digitize it.
Mm-hmm.
So people were, even before Photoshop, people were manipulating, at least in global ways, digital images for reproduction. Um, so yeah, it just occurred to me then, like, why can't I mean, just get rid of the matte stand and just try to do something from the beginning natively digitally because it was so cool because everybody started manipulating photographs. That's what Photoshop was designed to do.
Yeah.
And I still have, the first image that I think was a successful beginning to end painting that looks like paint in 24-bit color in Photoshop. Um, so that was exciting. And but it took another 10 years before Siegen came around and people really started trying to push that as hard as possible. Because literally anything could be done. But my background as a trained delineator helped immensely, and also the background of using gouache graphic, and that came from Sid Mead. So flat shape painting and flat shapes, that was really helpful in the beginning of digital because it could do flat shapes easily,
Mm. Yeah.
and it couldn't. You couldn't really blend an edge, and there weren't any Wacom pads. I didn't like the Wacom pads. I had one for a long time sitting on the shelf. So I didn't use one even after they were available, because I was still working pretty precisely,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt I didn't have much control with this thing, and I had my own curmudgeonly old man minute or moment thinking that all this feathery hand gestural stuff is hiding the fact whether or not I know what that shape should be. So it's basically, I'm going to scribble and make it look all gestural, and that's how I'm going to make it look cool. And I'm like, no, you need to get the structure right. So
Yeah.
even I was a cranky old man at, 30 or something. But now, I don't really. I've actually become a younger person as I've gotten older, as I actually understand the limitations of my own brain, and I can see what reactions that people have and I have to something that probably isn't correct because you understand your reaction to it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's just a kind of a brief overview of the start of it. Is that what your question was?
Yeah, yeah, more or less. I was just, I'm just, to me, it's just fascinating because you were on the forefront of digital art movement in a way, and it's very interesting. Like my initial not reaction, but sort of uh, the way I understand your answer is exactly what I was expecting. Is that you didn't look at it from a perspective, like you looked at it from a perspective, if I understand it correctly, obviously, that is an amazing tool, but it's like it's right in front of you, right? But there wasn't like this kind of, oh, like how does it feel to work in an emergent space? I'm getting an impression that you were just, oh, it's just obvious. I'm just gonna do what I do, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
with
yeah,
just
that's
this new
pretty much it.
thing. Um,
Well, that's kind of, like what we've been talking about, with people that, if it's kind of an internal compulsion, they do what
yeah,
they do.
exactly.
And, maybe my time in the sun was, for a year when I was 20. And then, I've just been taking up space ever since then.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. Um, I mean, just even like the history of it all is just, to me, it's like it's fascinating because, yeah, it's like I was not expecting, like as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm like you are sort of like the biggest legend in my eyes in terms of everything that's been done. I feel like almost ripple effects of your presence to so many industries that it's unfathomable, like digital art, the push of technology, changing industries, all this kind of stuff where you're like right in the center, like the maelstrom, and hearing like how it all started is just to me, it's just like an amazing thing.
Well, the thing is it's not really, I think, special to me. I mean, I was in the right place at the right time, and there's no doubt that 100 other people would have done what I did.
Yeah, but they didn't, and you did, you know.
I guess, I mean, that's true, and like I kind of look at it too, like I was painting. You know how like Alberto paints, or Alberto Mielgo, paints when he was working on Tron and Spider-Man, he painted architecture and did it by duplicating windows. And I think he said when he was in school, he did look at my work and learned a lot from it. And I did some of those things, but I didn't see what was possible with that style of working.
Mm-hmm.
But he did. And he took off and ran with it and made a whole new universe. He found a dead pig, but he was going to find one anyway because that's just who he is.
Yeah, yeah.
And so, I mean, we all influence one another's, and are these fulcrums and focal points and times that oftentimes are only recognizable decades later. That you don't really know, like, oh, that was I didn't even know to take notes or run the video camera when that was happening.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it's all hindsight, right? Like seeing
It
it all,
is.
seeing it all is like, oh wow. Yeah, it's
Makes
funny.
sense
It's
now.
funny on reflecting. Like when you mentioned when I asked you that question, and you're like, oh, I up until now was not really thinking about it.
Yeah,
It's all kind of hindsight, and like reflecting on past is you get to discover the things that maybe just flew by because we're just living life and those are the life experiences, and then like you kind of sit
right.
back and reflects like, yeah, wait a minute, that part was actually kind of cool, like
Yeah,
this happened, and like maybe I was lucky, maybe not, but it did happen,
yep.
and I was a
And
part of it, so
maybe
yeah.
the medium is the message, more than my own
Hmm.
work. But I do kind of think like something specific to me, and that my fascination and interest in 19th century painting styles and techniques, and just that way of looking at it, and like it's like I was talking a minute about Blade Runner crashing the two things together is like, okay, what if Rembrandt painted Batman?
Right. Yeah.
And that type of and if I have had that influence, yeah, I think like the whole idea of speed painting too has been, and it was unfortunate that computers can do flat very well, because you can abuse atmospheric perspective
Hmm.
immensely, and yeah, just fog it up. And then of course with Z buffers and view depths and very early hardware, that fed into that cheap out completely. And like I was just working with a company who I can't really say anything about, but I was tasked with making um, an authoritarian city kind of based on Rome, or Roman values. And I did not want to make it, and the director was, we don't want this to look like any other RPG city. And the first thing I thought of was, well, then don't make it symmetrical.
Yeah.
And, so I fought against that as hard as I could. And, most, like, was Rome symmetrical? No, because it has a very long history. It's like the only time symmetry might come into play is if you had a place that was probably came into a tremendous amount of money or resources very quickly, and was authoritarian right from the beginning, and there's a massive amount of city planning that happened. And I think the only ones maybe Canberra in Australia. I mean, that's very, and the fascist architecture, uh, brutalist. Even brutalist is not always symmetrical.
Yeah.
Um, but then think about like the limitations of early computers, when you just have to you know put a negative sign in half your numbers, and all of a sudden you have twice the you have instances just mirrored, and that's very inexpensive. So that's one reason why symmetrical crap looks like RPG cities. It's
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
it's cheap to do. And it's the same thing with abusing atmospheric perspective. And I was a little concerned, it's sad to see, like in the first Dune movie, when I think the Reverend Mothers came down in their spaceship and landed, and it was all done with backlights and wind. And I think that's cool, but you can't do that forever. It's like, okay, are we gonna all spaceships are gonna be backlit, and just like with it's like Close Encounters, like what are those lights really? What are behind those lens flares? It's an easy kind of cop out. Um, and I haven't seen the second Dune movie yet, but the highly desaturated, contrasty. I mean, my take on Getty Prime and the Baron and his world was always kind of I saw it as Roman,
Hmm.
which is my reflex to it. But in the movie, it's more like completely black. I think it would have been cool to do it like Heger did it, and Aronofsky's doing all the concept work for that. I mean,
Hmm.
highly corrupted, and it's almost like, okay, they care so little about the environment that really wicked, nasty new forms of life came out and like grew steel growing vines around everything, and there's some really cool stuff. I remember like Alien 3. I remember I was at ILM when the first scripts came through that, and originally that story was going to be it was a moon, but it was made out of wood. And so all these monks were living inside this wooden spaceship.
Right.
Like, okay, that sounds cool, but is it cool for the sake of cool, or are we just well, I don't know. With the old engineer in me, I like try to make it look cool to make it seem credible by trying solving the problems from first principles, but um,
Y-
that doesn't always work.
You
Anyway,
should.
I'm
You should.
rambling.
It's all good. It's great. You should check if you haven't seen Dune 2, I would recommend it for sure. I mean, I just recently rewatched the first one, and honestly, the second movie is like vastly better than the first one was.
Well, there's a
Just
lot more
even,
stuff going on, right?
yeah, but even just like from the way it was shot, and you know the cinematography is. I mean, the cinematography is the same person, right? It's Greg Fraser that did
Yeah,
both. But it was very interesting to listen to Greg talk about how did they approach the first one and how did they do the second, and why they made the choices they made, and how they are like significant to the story. It kind of starts to make sense in the
yes,
second one. And there's like far more bold choices that are made visually in the second movie that I thought
yeah,
were like really interesting and challenging. That were like, oh wow, like I was not expecting to see this done like this way, you know?
yeah. Well,
Um,
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it.
yeah, it's great.
Not many IMAX theaters on Maui, though.
Right. Yeah, definitely. It's definitely an IMAX experience to have, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well, look. I mean, I don't want to like over abuse your generosity with time that you're giving me here. It was.
Well,
I mean,
how long do these podcasts usually go on for?
I keep it open usually for as long as the guest ones, but I also I'm trying to be mindful here of your time. And we also just had like a half an hour of just rambling and chatting right
Yeah.
before. So it's an amazing. I probably have. I just need to, like, I probably have like a million questions that I would like to ask, but like even just the last like hour and a half of conversation we have, there's just so much information for me to process. You know what it is like, um, and I know I'm like kind of kind of kissing your ass here, like left and right, with praise and everything, but it's just like it reminds me of reading Meditations from Marcus Aurelius. It's like that's a book that you cannot read for too long. Like you need to pause and take breaks because it's just so dense with
Uh-huh.
information. And I almost feel like chatting with you, whether it was like AI topics or others, is it's exactly that. It's just like I was like sitting quiet and just listening. I could, if you had like a 4 hour lecture, I would totally like listen to it. Just sit down and listen, you know. Just soak in
Oh gosh.
information, soak in as much information as I can.
Well,
You know what I mean?
I stuck my foot in my mouth pretty severely with Ash,
How
which
so?
we both laughed over.
uh, but anyways, yeah, it's massive, and I mean massive fan, and I'm super super honored to have you on. I
Well,
would
I
love
was
to get you on again, like in the near future, because
sure.
I just need to like take notes and all right, which topics we didn't cover yet? Because once we start this is another 2 hours of conversation for sure. um,
Yes.
and yeah, I just love the idea of just going deep into the subject and not just covering topics surface level.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah. Do you have any like questions you would want to ask, or anything that before we wrap this up, like you would want to promote or talk about, like any
Oh
like stage
gosh.
is yours.
Uh, um,
Just go
I
to
I just say, um, and view this through the lens of my rant about cranky old man. But if you don't have to have social media, don't. And
Amen.
also if you don't have to go to ArtStation, then don't, because it is one, it will increase the incest in the industry because you'll see powerful work done by powerful tools with powerful individuals at the top, and it'll run right over the top of whatever delicate little flower is trying to emerge from your soul.
Mm.
And that is the worst thing that can happen. The influence is much too powerful. And I love the music of Wagner, and 50 years after him, classical music was just trying to come out from that powerful influence. And it was very, very difficult, but you always were hearing it, and people were like, well, what can you do with an orchestra after that? And obviously there's immense amounts you can do, but the influence had a dampening effect on innovation for a long time. And I think that very strong influences like uh 5,000 images that you're bombarded with instantly when you go to ArtStation. um the total output of the world, was it like you know being exposed to the total knowledge of the universe will immediately burn out your brain.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
would. If you die and see, Saint Peter, and he says, "Okay, get ready for the truth," and your brain explodes all over the cloud. Um, yeah. So if you don't have to go there, don't. And look in your own life and world for influences. Be very careful about what you pull out of the environment. I'm sure everybody is smart enough not to listen to people who are trying to push things into your brain. Most people have figured that one out. But also, it's like, careful about what you allow in, because everybody like pulls things in. It's like, let me call you back so I make sure you're not a scammer. No, it's kind of the same thing with art information. Is just be careful of why you're listening to this, why you're influenced by that, why you want to be that. Do you really want to be somebody else? I went through a whole period of my career. It was really miserable when I'd see all these amazing things that people were doing, and a lot of it was based on my work, and I wanted to catch up with them, and I wanted to eat this person's liver to get a little bit of that magic. And in the end, um, you have to be yourself, and because you
Mm.
cannot be anybody else, and trying to integrate influences from a planet that has 8 billion people on it is going to burn out your brain, and you're not going to be able to do it successfully. So not only limit what you're seeing, but how much. And so it's very difficult to be selective or go through some type of filtering process so that you're not burned alive by the massive amount of information that's out there, and that cute little flower that's growing doesn't get burned alive, which it can very easily. So anyway, that's the only thing I would say, from a soapbox kind of thing.
Yeah, amen. Amen.
But then, once again, I'll go back to what I was saying earlier, was there are some people who are 20 that say, bring it on, give me all the stimulation, bring it on, just let it burn me.
Those
What did
young
Morgana
bucks.
say? Then burn me.
Yeah, the kids these days.
Yeah, but that more power to them. And again, if I don't understand what you're doing, you're probably doing something right, because just by definition.
Yeah.
Okay, I gotta go. You gotta go.
I guess there's no
Uh,
formula though. For
no,
sure.
there really isn't.
Yeah.
And that for paying students, I'm like, okay, thank you for your money. There is no formula. Draw a lot. Have a good day. But that's the truth, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm upset about saying that. So okay, you want me to draw over what you did? Okay. How do you learn how to do that? By drawing a lot, by failing endlessly, failing millions of times. And finally, you might get it. In the middle of the night where you're sleeping, then you learn how to draw. And next time you try, you see the evidence of that.
Yeah. That's how we learn. That's how we get
Yeah.
better. By failure and
Yep.
learning from it. Yeah. Craig, it was amazing. Amazing chatting with
Okay.
you.
Yes, thank you. It's been a pleasure for me to speak with you. And sure, we can do it again sometime if you get positive likes from
I don't
uh
look at it at all. I could care less for likes
good.
or
Yeah, that's what you should do,
yeah.
is never look at that nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only reason I have podcasts and have those conversations is just I love his work. I love this person's work. I love what they do. They're really interesting. I want to
Yeah.
learn. And by
Right.
proxy, if anyone else can take some lesson out of it, great. That's sort of
Yeah.
that's always been my approach. I never. I mean, yeah, there are
Yeah, me
channels
too.
and podcasts that
Definitely.
treat it as business and
Yeah.
massage the thumbnails and the click through
Drew,
and
drew little arrows on all those thumbnails.
and surprised face. It's like you cannot believe what's in this episode.
Yes. Yeah.
And maybe that's the
Greg
way to
Mullins
go.
takes a dump on my desk
Like a boss, dude.
like a boss.
Hilarious.
All right, Michelle. I appreciate the time, and let's do it again
Likewise. Thank you so
sometime.
much. Yeah, let's
All
do it
right.
again.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks, Craig. Have an amazing, amazing day.